Hello, it's your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley here again, back for another episode of History of Comics Podcast. This time, part 2, the history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When we last left off, the Turtles have gone from a simple independent comic book to a full-blown media empire with comics, cartoons, and now they'll be jumping into the movies. With the success of the toys and cartoons, Mark Friedman had a new market for Turtles in mind, live-action movies. He was inspired by the success of the 1989 Batman film, which incidentally spurred a relaunch of comic book movies in general, and was even approached by Gallagher, the infamous watermelon-smashing comedian, and his producing partner Kim Dawson, who had proposed a comedy with John Candy playing all the Turtles. Friedman quickly rejected that one, but the meeting did introduce him to producer Tom Gray, who worked with Golden Harvest, the movie studio that is noted for introducing Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan films to international audiences. Friedman wanted a different experience over the cartoon to appeal to an older audience, thus he was approached also by Limelight Entertainment to co-produce, who brought on Steve Barron to direct. Barron was previously a noted music video director, doing videos for a-ha and Michael Jackson, along with episodes of the Emmy-winning Jim Henson's The Storyteller. It was the latter that would be most helpful, as he called on Henson to help with the puppetry for the Turtles. Soon, the Creature Shop of London and Jim Henson's son Brian was brought on. Kevin Eastman especially liked Steve Barron since he wanted to stick to the original comics. Budgeted for $13.5 million, the film's story would tell the origin of Turtles while fighting the Shredder and his Foot Clan in New York City, while also introducing reporter April O'Neil and vigilante Casey Jones. The studio chose to film in North Carolina, who had provided generous tax breaks to film studios who filmed there, due to Dino De Laurentiis' own studio going bankrupt. They did some establishing shots of New York City, such as the skyline and subway system, as they couldn't replicate that in North Carolina. Filming began in July of 1989 for 2 months, with only 10 weeks of pre-production. This was especially daunting for Henson's Creature Shop, who were used to a much longer pre-production schedule. They had 7 months for Labyrinth and Little Shop of Horrors, for example. The cast was also mostly unknown, with the one recognizable name being then child star Corey Feldman for the voice of Donatello. For the human characters, Judith Hoag was cast as April O'Neil, while Elias Koteas played Casey Jones. Hoag was reportedly urged to do the part by Robin Williams, with whom she was filming Cadillac Man with at the time. Williams was apparently a huge fan who collected all the comics, along with being the only person on the cast who ever even heard of the project. Williams would later surprise Hoag at this premiere when he showed up with his kids to see the film. A further note of the late great Robin Williams' surprising geekdom, he reportedly named his daughter Zelda after the video game character from The Legend of Zelda. Also of interesting note, future Oscar winner Sam Rockwell will have a small role as head thug in the film, while Skeet Ulrich and Scott Wolf also had big parts. Ernie Reyes Jr. was one of the actors who actually performed in the turtle suits, having to replace a Hong Kong stuntsman when he was injured. Filming inside the turtle shoots was arduous, with North Carolina's 100-degree weather and humidity, though the studio worked to make everyone as comfortable as possible, with night shoots when it was cooler and cooling tents. The suits themselves had 2 models, Stunt and Hero. The Stunt was worn for the action and martial arts sequences, while the Hero was used for the acting, as the complex facial rigs couldn't endure the action scenes. These suits were worn by Hong Kong stuntsmen, who later commented that the padding in them helped with the action scenes, as they could take more punch and make the fights look better. The Hero suit was a true innovation, with its complex animatronics that were controlled wirelessly by the puppeteer, still a new technology in the industry. The Henson Company had previously used it for Haggle in the film Labyrinth and for the dog in The Storyteller. To imitate the facial features for the turtles, the puppeteers used their hands, similar to how puppeteers used them for regular puppets, while the turtles' design once again proved fortuitous, as their shells provided ample space for the puppeteer motors and radios. To help coordinate the actors in the suits and the puppeteers, a radio was also installed in the head that communicated between the two. For Splinter, Peter Brook, a veteran from the Storyteller series, sculpted the character Puppet, who was operated and acted by Kevin Clash, the creator and actor of the Elmo Sesame Street character. Clash would sit inside Splinter's torso, operating the mouth with his hand, thus they had to conceal his legs. Notice he rarely walks in the film, while another puppeteer controlled the arms. With such complex creations involving all the puppeteers, they required constant maintenance, essentially making it a 24-hour operation. When the suits weren't being used for filming, they were on the bench being worked on. With all this, Michelin Sisti, a hero turtle actor, recalls the crazy shooting schedule, usually starting at a call time of 6 a.m., which they were fitted with a tight underdress and mold fittings. There were multiple rehearsals. The first where they walked through the lines, choreography, and the blocking. The second wearing the suit, minus the head. And then the third rehearsal with the suit and head in place. As the shoot continued, the process got better and they were able to skip straight to the heads-on phase of the rehearsal. Though the suits remained tough to work with, being 50 pounds on their own and 60 to 70 when wet from the actors' sweat and humidity from outside. Worst of all, Steve Barron had a falling out with Golden Harvest while editor Sally Mankey was fired. She landed on her feet, becoming Quentin Tarantino's editor, working on such classics as Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Glorious Bastards, the last two which she received Oscar nominations for. Sadly, she passed away in 2010. Thankfully, despite all this, the film was completed, but Fox, who was originally planned to distribute the film, backed out. So New Line, the studio best known at the time for Nightmare on Elm Street films, stepped in. Mark Friedman worked to get endorsement tie-ins with the film, which included Burger King, but strangely, not Pizza Hut. When the film was screened, Friedman reportedly liked it, but the execs and playmates hated it, worried about its darker tone. This is a film where Splinter is kidnapped and tortured while Raphael is beaten into a coma. Nevertheless, when released on March 30th, 1990, it was an instant success, grossing $135 million domestically with a worldwide total of $202 million, making it the highest-grossing independent film of the era. With that success, Pizza Hut suddenly liked the film, go figure, and started a $20 million ad campaign to tie in with it. Now, with a successful comic book, toy line, cartoon, and now feature film, the Turtles had truly exploded into the market, and the merchandising was sure to follow. Another significant expansion for the Turtles franchise was the video games from Konami, with the Teenage Mutant Turtles game for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1989, which ended up selling 4 million units, along with winning Game of the Year by Nintendo Power magazine. Though that game was really hard. To date, I don't know anyone's actually beaten it. The Game Boy had its own with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Follow the Foot Clan, which was also a huge success, along with winning Game of the Year for the Game Boy. The game would naturally spawn Game Boy sequels with Back to the Sewers and Radical Rescue. Both games were produced by Konami. However, the biggest entry in the video game market was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game, a 4-player beat-em-up that was released in 1989 and is considered a classic of the era. The arcade game would be ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, and even led to a sequel based on the same format called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project in 1992, which would be named the best Nintendo game of the year by Electron Gaming Monthly. As for the original arcade game, it would get its own sequel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, which continued the 4-player arcade beat-em-up format as the Turtles traveled throughout time to fight Krang and the Shredder. The game would be adapted for the Super Nintendo to high acclaim despite the downgraded graphics. It remains not only one of the most popular video games of the era, it received a 2009 remake Turtles in Time reshell due to such high demand. But many even consider it the best adaptation of Turtles outside the comic book medium, with Entertainment Weekly proclaiming, "The Turtles may have peaked in the big screen, but it is in video games where they are reaching their true potential." Side note, my brother-in-law still has an original SNES and he's been looking for a high and low for a quality copy of Turtles in Time. If anyone knows where to, please message me on Facebook or Twitter, please. The Sega Genesis wasn't left out either, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Hyperstone Heist that was more or less a clone of Turtles in Time, though Screw Attack ranked it the 19th best Sega Genesis game in their top 20 release recently. The Turtles even got into the fighting game genre in 1993 with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, in which players could play against the CPU or another player, selecting not just the Turtles but their villains as well, released on the Nintendo, Super NES, and Genesis. With all these, the Turtles have proven to be a successful franchise in the video game medium as well, showing the powers of the Turtles in general, and they weren't stopping. In December of 1990, the Creative Syndicate made daily strips, which lasted to January of 1997. Steve Murphy wrote the strip while Ryan Brown did the art, and Dan Berger eventually taking over when it became apparent that Brown didn't have the time for it. Another expansion of the Turtles brand was also through Pizza Hut, was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Coming Out of Their Shells, a music concert tour that featured actors playing the Turtles in the movie costumes while lip-syncing the songs to stop the Shredder and Baxter Stockman from ruining music. The show opened in Radio City Music Hall along with being on pay-per-view on August 17, 1990, and was promoted on The Oprah Winfrey Show and Regis and Kathy Lee. As far as Eastman and Lair's involvement, they gave costume approval and that was about it. However, they both admitted to enjoying the show when singing it, and one of the songs, Pizza Power, made it into the Turtles in Time video game. Back at Mirage, Gary Richardson, who was previously the company's accountant since 1987, was made CFO, Chief Financial Officer, in June of 1991, and would later be made CEO, Chief Executive Officer, in 1996, allowing the founders Eastman and Laird to focus on the creative side of the business, along with getting time to finally enjoying their hard work, fame, and fortune. Laird reportedly required up to 32 motorcycles at one point, and also bought one of the first Hummers ever put on market. A motorcycle enthusiast in general, he also sponsored Team Mirage motorcycle racing team, which featured the Teenage Mutant Turtle bikes. As per their licensing contract, every cartoon, movie, and toy had to be created by Eastman and Laird, which they didn't take for granted. Deciding to build on their success, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird joined with Dave Sim, the creator of Cerebus, to create the Creators' Bill of Rights, hoping to spread this message throughout the comic book industry. The impetus for this was when Dave Sim decided to sell his collected volume of Cerebus High Society directly to his readers over the Diamond Distribution Network, which ended up netting him $100,000 in profit. When Diamond learned of this, they threatened to stop distribution of the Puma Blues, the comic by Stephen Murphy and Michael Zui, which was published by Sim's Aardvark One International, with Diamond representing a third of its sales. In response, Sim enlisted the aid of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, hoping to bring along other creators as well to form a Bill of Rights to justify bypassing Diamond altogether. Hosting a summit in Northampton on November 1988 for the Creators' Bill of Rights, a document was outlined that the rights of the creators and their publishers. Scott McCloud, the writer of the Understanding Comics, was the principal author of the bill, with other signers being Steve Bessett and Rich Vetch. An early draft of the bill would later be published in the Comics Journal on July 1989, with a final version appearing in the journal in September of 1990. One of the main principles of the bill Dave Sim championed was the right to sell your work however you choose, and ultimately Diamond relented, allowing the Puma Blues to still be distributed through it as well, while Sim continued to sell his Cerebus collections directly to readers. Ultimately, though, the bill didn't generate much interest in the industry, with even its author, Scott McCloud, later dismissing its importance, arguing the success of Eastman and Laird as independent creators did more for creators' rights than anything else. Kevin Eastman continued to champion his past artists, funding the Words and Pictures Museum, which showcased comics art in 20,000 pieces, from Frank Frazetta to Jack Kirby, while also starting a separate comic book company, Tundra, in 1990, spending upwards of $14 million on it until 1993 when operations ended. In principle, Eastman modeled it around the rules set in the Creators' Bill of Rights, which also included the right to creative ownership and control of licensing. Under this company, he produced Cages by Dave McKean, The Crow by James O'Barr, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, and From Hell by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. Tundra later merged with the famed underground comics publisher Kitchen Sink Press. Sadly, when Tundra went under, it took Kitchen Sink with it, which eventually folded in 1999. Later, Eastman bought Heavy Metal Magazine, the famed science fiction and fantasy comics magazine known for its mature content, when it ran into 2014 before selling it to David Boxenbaum and Jeff Krelix, while still staying on as minority investor and publisher. Another avenue Peter Laird put his money towards was establishing the Xeric Foundation in 1992, a nonprofit to help self-publishers along with local charities. It was founded to deal with numerous requests for help by Laird due to his fame and success. In 2012, the foundation stopped issuing grants, but still supports nonprofits in western Massachusetts. Naturally, with the success of the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a sequel is instantly in the works with Michael Pressman hired to direct. Called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, it will be released less than a year after the original, with a story involving the Turtles learning the secrets of the mutations while dealing with the return of the Shredder. Eastman and Laird were worried and disappointed by the loss of Steve Barron as director and Brian Henson, believing that the film would not maintain the edge of the original and not more like the cartoon. They were correct, as the Turtles rarely used their weapons in the film to make it more kid-friendly. The studio, in turn, rushed the sequel, believing the Turtles were going to fade out quickly. As a result, April O'Neil was recast from Judith Hoag to Paige Taruko, while Casey Jones was cut from the film. However, Aaron Reyes Jr. enjoyed making the film, as he got to play an on-screen character, Kino, a pizza delivery boy turned Turtles ally, the studio having been so impressed with his work as Donatello in the first film. One factor of the first movie that the studio did want to replicate was its soundtrack, which the original featured MC Hammer's This Is What We Do and Turtle Power by Partners in Crime, which was number 13 on the United States music charts and number 1 in the UK. With its larger $25 million budget for the film, much of it's committed to the music, hiring Vanilla Ice to make Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go. The studio reasoned the technology for Turtles was already developed so they could just spend money on elsewhere. Vanilla Ice immediately signed on, stating he was a huge fan of the Turtles franchise. The film also introduced villainous mutants Tokka